Betsy, how did you train during your pregnancy? Were you still kind of doing CrossFit, or at
Yeah.
that point had you guys switched to more functional bodybuilding?
No, I think we were still pretty CrossFit. I knew that diastasis recti was a thing. I knew that my core shouldn't really be used during pregnancy. I wasn't really aware of protecting my pelvic floor, but I was aware of not falling. And so things like box jumps I didn't do, not because of the impact that jumping would have, but because I didn't want to fall on my belly or risk that. So there was things that I modified, like pull-ups I modified right away because I was at that point when we were doing a lot of CrossFit stuff, it was more of a butterfly or kipping pull-ups. So even strict can put a lot of strain there, but for sure in those kind of ballistic ways of doing pull-ups, I stopped that right away, did more of a seated like lat pull down, modified my push-ups so that there was never any contact with the belly, things like that. The only other things I modified as far as lifting and weight wise were if I felt weird, like if I felt pressure, I carried very, very low. So if I would feel like, ooh, this might be pushing a baby out, or I mean, if you're a girl and you've used a tampon before, you know what that like it would feel like to have something in there and trying not to come out. So if I ever felt that, that was when I stopped. But luckily, I didn't go the full 40 weeks. So I personally think that helps my pelvic floor not have quite as much pressure on it. And I didn't have a vaginal birth either. But I didn't have a whole lot of symptoms except for the diastasis about a year after.
And when you ended up having your C-section, was that something like, I know with my sister-in-law, because she was just like super teeny and super fit, it was like, yo, hey, I know we're early into her pregnancy, but you need to take it easy. Cause she would have
For
like
sure.
contractions when she would be like vacuuming the house.
Yeah.
So it was like, I think by the time she was, halfway through her pregnancy, it was like, yo, you're on bed rest. Like we ain't doing this.
Yeah.
With yours, like, did they have any expectation that you might carry earlier and stuff like that?
No, my mom delivered early, and I did watch my intensity quite a bit. We were so shocked when we found out that I was pregnant and had no guidance, that my only guidance was from the doctor, which most women's are. And it was to do 100, keep my heart rate at 150 or below and not lift over 35 pounds. So the not lifting over 35 pounds, I was like, okay, she just doesn't know me. She doesn't know, that's not relevant to me. And I kind of ignored it and listened to my body instead. I did, however, try to keep my heart rate below 150. And I remember the last few weeks of my pregnancy. So I do photography as well. And at that time, there were a lot of family photos. In the fall in Texas, that's where everyone wants to do family photos because it's finally not hot. So I was working a lot. And so all that to say, intensity, whether it was workout or work life, was pretty high. And I can't imagine if I was to go even more intense, how much earlier I would have been. But a lot of women, the intensity doesn't really have to stay as low. Like 150 isn't relevant. I know Cara didn't necessarily have to watch her heart rate at all. But yeah, there were no real signs that I was going to deliver early. In fact, I went to the hospital thinking I was maybe in labor 2 days before I actually did give birth. And they told me it was false labor. They did an exam and everything and said I was fine. It was just Braxton Hicks. And then 2 days later, I had him. So nobody knew that was going to happen for sure.
Fun story. So I saw my mom over the weekend. My mom was a critical care and ICU nurse. She was saying, and like I said, this is the first time I've ever heard this, but somehow we got on the topic of like pregnancy and deliveries because we were talking with my sister-in-law. And so my mom was saying it's super common for women to get to the hospital and they actually don't make it in the door. Like they might end up giving labor basically like in the lawn of the hospital, which is just so wild.
That's wild.
Because I guess like with my mom, that actually happened.
That's insane.
So my mom was saying, I think it was with my middle brother, she like realized like, oh shit, like I'm about to start, like this is happening. And so
Yeah.
she's like trying to drive to the hospital, which like in retrospect, it's like, yo, you probably shouldn't be like trying to drive yourself. But she was saying like, that was literally the thing. She was like, I don't want to give birth outside. I don't want to give birth, outside in public. Like, please just let me make it to the hospital. And I was like, oh, that's so funny. Because it's
Yeah.
like, again, it's one of those, like, if you've never been through pregnancy, you don't know like how fast things happen, what to look out for. So I was just dying when she was talking about that.
Did she make it?
She did make it.
Good.
Have y'all seen the videos of people like having a baby in the parking lot? Like the baby
Yeah.
just falls out?
No. I've only seen that in the movies. Like,
Alex, I'm going to send you some on Instagram. They're wild.
that's wild.
See that? I just feel like that's so lucky because it means it's just fast. Like, you're not laboring for forever, but I don't know. Maybe not in public. Maybe like,
Yeah. Maybe not a parking lot.
yeah.
I had a question about the heart rate thing. So it sounds like keeping your heart rate below a certain situation is kind of like old or outdated recommendations. But like, what's the reasoning for that? And I ask because it's like, I feel like present day, you see people like competing at the CrossFit Games, running a marathon. So like, what's is it just they think that it's going to cause strain on the body and then pregnancy occurs earlier or?
No, I think it mostly just has to do with like blood flow to the baby. They think, it's going to take blood flow away from the baby. But honestly, your body's not going to do that. It's going to prioritize the baby and give that baby enough blood flow. But yeah, it's never really been the thing about pregnancy and postpartum fitness. There's not a ton of studies. And the reason is, who's going to sign up for a study when they're pregnant, right? Because it's not just your body, it's your baby that could be affected as well. So there's really just not a lot. And so everything that they've just been saying for forever. And it just really errs on the side of caution. And I think really a lot of it too has to be, maybe if your heart rate's too high, then you could get dizzy, you could pass out. So there's just different things like that. And another thing, and this is just my personal speculation, women weren't in as intensive situations physically and sports-wise, athletically, life situations. Yes, I know a lot of women were in intense life situations, but as far as training with intensity, that just wasn't very common a while ago. And so the doctors to say like, just err on the side of caution, don't do it. But now we have so many more women who are always training at a high heart rate. So their body's just used to that. And so really, I think they should be, they'll be okay.
Well, and it's all relative. And if you want data, then you would have had to have been tracking your heart rate before and understanding how, there's plenty of math you could do to figure out what that percentage is that's right for you. But who's actually studying that beforehand and calculating it? So instead, we typically say, just make sure that you can still breathe while you're doing it. You could still have a conversation. And if you do that, that's probably going to lead your body in the right direction.